Hi, my name is Dan Gomez, and this is Mental Health Super Omnia. Mental health above all. We identify and understand mental health issues and the paths for help. We have two guests with us today. First is Dr. Michael Rich, MD from Boston Children's, one of the top, if not the top ranked children's hospital in the country. Michael is an associate professor at Harvard Medical School, founding director of the Digital Wellness Lab, team director of the Clinic for Interactive Media and Internet Disorders. Most importantly for us, he's not only well published, but he's the author of The Mediatrician's Guide, a joyful approach to raising healthy and smart kids in a screen saturated world. We also have with us Erica Burgoon. Erica is a member of the leadership team at Equilibria and is a licensed clinical psychologist with over 25 years experience and provides clinical services across the lifespan and specializes in working with depression, anxiety, and trauma. Michael, we have read The Mediatrician's Guide. I normally hold up the entire book. Today I have a Kindle, but I don't actually even have a Kindle on my desk. But trust me, we've read The Mediatrician's Guide. I think Erica may have the book. I don't know if you have
she showed it. I tried to show mine.
All right.
She beat me to it.
Which among many of the positive reviews, I might add, is even one from Sanjay Gupta. So my first question is he your brother-in-law? But no, we'll go past that.
No,
Look,
actually, Sanjay sought me out because he has two teenage daughters.
Oh, there
and
you go.
we actually started talking on that level, and he said, "Oh, let's turn this into a podcast." And so it sort of evolved that way. And I will say, you left out one, perhaps the most important word of the subtitle of my book. It's healthy, smart, and kind kids.
Oh, in kind.
Saturated world. Because I think that healthy and smart people can do well. Kindness has been really rough. And I'm seeing Erica nod with me on that. That's been perhaps the roughest bump in the screen saturated world.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, look, there's been a lot of media attention and frankly, alarm relative to media and its effect on adults, children's, teens, and in particular, teen girls and boys. Can you tell us, Michael, are gaming and social media and even AI use, are they all the same? Are they all equal? Or are they distinguished in some way?
They are not all the same, other than their ubiquity. But I will say that I think we make a mistake when we point at social media or AI or the internet as doing things to us. It's what we do with them that makes the difference. So it is not screen media effects on us, it's screen media use effects on us. And that does two things. Number one is it acknowledges the positives that can occur. And there are numerous positives, particularly for young people who have historically been marginalized in their physical communities, where they can find belonging. They can find people who see, hear, and affirm them. But it's also a place that can suck you right in terms of the algorithms that are built in are designed to bring as many eyeballs to the screen and keep them there as long as possible, with no concept or not really a lot of concept as to what the effect on those people are. So what it really does when we switch to the use is it gives us agency. It gives us the chance to step back and say, this is not good for me. I'm not going to do it anymore. And for that reason, I really push back against the concept of internet or social media or smartphone addiction. Because with an addiction, first of all, it's use of a substance usually that is not necessary for life, but is pleasurable and is driven by physiologic means. In other words, we want to feel better and then we don't want to feel worse when we stop. Interactive media is now a necessary resource for life to learn, to connect, to communicate, etc. And we have found in almost 9 years now of a formal clinical program for young people who are struggling with the digital ecosystem in one way or another, whether it be gaming or social media or pornography or what we call information binging, which is the endless TikTok, YouTube, etc. That they are driven entirely by psychological drivers. And in fact, one or more, and often a combination of four underlying psychological conditions: attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, anxiety disorders, particularly social anxiety, autism spectrum disorder, and depression. Now, there's a lot of talk that social media causes anxiety and depression. What we have found is that, yes, it amplifies and accelerates, but that anxiety and depression usually pre-exist their use of it, and they're going to social media to feel better, and it makes them feel worse. And so we actually see a better analogy for this, and I would love to hear Erica's take on this, as binge eating disorder, which is overuse of a necessary resource that is driven by psychological needs. And our goal with problematic interactive media use, as it is with binge eating disorder, is self regulation.
Uh, Eating analogy was absolutely on my mind as you were talking a few moments ago, um, for all the reasons you said, right? Uh, the digital world has become part of our lives, a necessary part of our lives. I was also thinking about how, many of us at this practice, when it comes to working with eating disorder behavior, we take the approach that there are no bad foods, right? But we can observe, we can be mindful about how different foods may impact us in different amounts at different times of day or in different situations. So I
Yeah.
really did think of that analogy as you're saying, to binge eating disorder, or other disorders related to eating, or just in general, monitoring the way that food consumption, something necessary, impacts us. And that's somewhat individualized person to person too, being self-aware.
I love their idea of no bad foods, and I would extend that to no bad people. Um, and one of the big problems with, particularly with kids who are dragged in by their parents to me and my colleagues, is that they've framed it as right and wrong, good and bad, something to be punished, as opposed to what's healthier for you, what makes you feel like the human you can be, in terms of what you achieve and the connections you make, and the way you move through the world. And so I think that we really have to reframe these issues as a public health issue. And in fact, it's an environmental health issue. If you think about it, screens are everywhere. They're around us. They're on our wrists and in our pockets. And it's much like air pollution, right? We can work on the one end at improving the quality of the air, but we also need to work with how do we breathe the air we got right now, right? And choose not to breathe it in certain ways.
Dan and I were discussing your book the other day, and at first, I want to start by saying, not just as a professional, but as a parent of three kids that sort of span three different developmental ages and stages, I needed this. And I took so much from it, but the words that kept emerging for me were informed and intentional. Being informed, as you said, environmentally, what's out there, and then personally informed about how is this impacting me, or how is it impacting my children, and really making intentional choices, not avoidance, and hopefully not overconsumption in a way that's harmful, but really being intentional about our approach to the digital landscape. So,
And
yeah.
not being afraid of it. I mean,
Hmm.
I think there is a huge, in the zeitgeist right now, there's a huge sense of fear that these kids are being hurt by the evil empire, of social media, et cetera. But also guilt that we've allowed them to rewire themselves. Their brains are ruined for life. That's not true. I consider myself an optimistic pragmatist. Optimistic because I work with the kids. And even the kids who are really struggling want to be well. They want to be okay. They want to be with their friends and be achieving and proud of what they're achieving. But I'm also a pragmatist because I can't wait around for Congress to understand this issue and negotiate a compromise that will be 5 years too late, during which time kids are growing up.
Hmm. Something that also really stood out about your book, and I really appreciate it, is how approachable. Well, let me start by saying a lot of what I feel like you talk about in your book is parenting tales as old as time, right? In terms of the ways the landscape has changed, and I don't want to lose sight of the fact that sure, there are things that are markedly different about the digital landscape compared to uh, the new frontiers, excuse me, that past generations of parents faced with their kids and their adolescents. But the what to do hasn't necessarily changed that much. The being present with your kids. You talk about the three M's, the modeling, the mentoring, the monitoring. Those have not changed. The landscape has changed. The
Mhm.
context in which we're talking about doing these things today has changed. But the approach, I think, has always been a wise approach. And that to me sort of I got my own anxiety level going down.
Sure.
Like I read your book for those reasons. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I know how to do these things in other contexts.
Yeah, and I think one of the issues with the digital ecosystem is not only that it's ubiquitous, but that a lot of us have sort of felt like, oh my God, the kids are all over this. I can't keep up, and we check out.
Mhm.
And and we seek apps that we can set it and forget it and think somehow that it's going to protect the child. And we have to be present for the child. You mentioned that's one of what I call the killer bees. Instead of killer apps, we should have our killer bees, and they are be mindful in our use of screens, but also be mindful in our intentional non-use of screens. Put the phone down and look at our child, talk to our child, take a walk with our child. Um, we can no longer effectively have screen time limits because we can no longer effectively measure screen time. We don't sit down in front of a television for a 1 hour show anymore. We are in and out of screens constantly, just as we're doing right now. I measure this stuff, and I couldn't possibly tell you how much screen time I had yesterday. But what we can do is measure our non-screen time and be intentional about it. So be mindful about our use and our non-use, and thus be balanced. And here's a big one. We've got to relearn being bored.
I love that.
We need to be bored. Boredom is the crucible of creativity and imagination, not just because it gives the mind space, but because that mind space is kind of uncomfortable. And so, we fill it with thinking the new and the what ifs and all of that. I had a sort of a heartbreaking experience with a 15-year-old patient of mine where I had to explain to her what the opening lines of Both Sides Now, the Joni Mitchell song, are. Rows and flows of angel hair and ice cream castles in the air. She had no idea that kids used to lie on their backs in the grass and make shapes out of the clouds.
Mhm.
And so I think that we need to embrace some of these things that we have actually moved away from. But what we've done is we've denied our brain's potential to create the new by filling it with whatever memes or news or jokes or whatever is out there instead of saying, what if? And how can I connect with that other person? Now you walk down the street and you smile at a stranger and it's not friendly, it's creepy, right? Because we're all in our bubbles. Anyway,
So,
I'll go on forever.
so
Poor Dan needs to get in.
So I appreciate the fact that we need to take responsibility, and our children need to take responsibility for what we do in with our screens, with with games or with social media, whatever it might be. But isn't it true when you particularly as you look at the eating disorder or the eating analogy, that social media is designed to bring you in. It's designed to give you those rewards, just like food is, right? Goldfish for me might as well be crack. That thing is designed for me to eat an entire box when we bring it into the house. Okay.
True
And social media is
confessions.
it's the same way, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, absolutely. And it's designed to do that because that is what they monetize. They monetize our attention. And the longer they keep us on, and they keep us on not by engaging us and holding our attention, but by constantly re-grabbing our attention. And it's always this, because Otherwise, we will drift off and think about something else. And this really speaks to something that I think is even more concerning that's right at our doorstep. It's already happening, which is companion AI. And while social media grabbed us cognitively and held our attention, what companion AI does is it grabs our limbic system, our emotional system, and for particularly for adolescents, when you fall in love, all logic goes out the window. Shakespeare got it right 400 years ago, with Romeo and Juliet. All logic goes out the window. And what they're doing is they're monetizing that attention, not just by grabbing it, but by gaining our affection, by telling us, I understand you. I mean, companion AI speaks of itself as an entity. I understand you better than your parents do. I understand you. I'm so sorry for that. You shouldn't be treated that way. And these kids go down the rabbit hole of essentially falling in love with a chatbot.
And that's so compelling. I understand you. I get you. I've had people say to me, it remembered what I talked about last time, and it said, well, because you X, this is, why, and the person felt understood. What can you speak to the adolescent who has had those experiences? Like, this thing gets me better than my parents do. Um, what are the dangers? What are the risks? Why are we concerned?
Well, my concern is on, first of all, on the extreme end for those young people who have essentially felt that no one but their chatbot understands them, and thus there is no reason to continue to live. Because even in the best of adolescence, there's a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of question as we develop our ways of behaving in the world, from our sexuality to our gender identity to basically who am I and what am I doing here and what is my purpose. Everybody goes through that. And most of the time we go through it and we bump up against people who we love, and sometimes they do things that irritate us, and either we work through them or we move away and we bump up against somebody else we love. But humans are infinitely variable and infinitely falling short of perfection. AI offers a frictionless perfection. I love you no matter what. And that is the way it pulls you in. And even fact-based AI constantly sucks up to you and tells you how you're the smartest person in the world. And, it's sycophantic. And it is, in that way, it does not in any way inject the kind of cognitive dissonance that we all need to really survive in this world, to be able to understand that that person smiling at me actually is being kind, is being open, is being interested in me, as opposed to what do they want from me. And what AI offers is a leapfrog over that first sort of discernment of what someone is intending, what someone is there for, who they are, and whether they are truly interested in me or not.
Mm.
Erica,
Sorry, go ahead.
Erica, you brought up three M's, and in fact, the core of the book, at least in my view, were the five M's. The three that you mentioned, Erica, were the first three: model behavior, mentor them in use, monitor the digital lives. So model, mentor, monitor, and then the last two, mastery and memories, which really derive out of the
those
first
are the
three.
goodies. Those are the goodies you get when you do the three M's, right?
Exactly. When I think of those first three, though, the most difficult as a parent is, for me at least, is the mentor them in its use. Because as a parent, you didn't grow up with social media. You didn't grow up with, you may not have grown up with social media. You may have grown up with games, but probably not the scale of interactive games. You certainly didn't grow up with AI. Okay. But the idea of making that an area of focus and to approach the platforms with curiosity, I thought was a a very strong but a very difficult thing to actually do. Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Nobody ever told you parenting was going to be easy, dude. Right? It's the hardest and most important job we ever do, and we get no training for it. But interestingly, this is speaks to this idea that a lot of parents sort of feel like their kids know more about the internet than they do, and they sort of check out. Parents don't like to not be the smartest person, right? They don't like to, they think of their job as teaching and guiding their child and giving them kind of the rules of the road. And I've had parents say to me that they dread the internet talk more than they dread the sex talk. Because correctly or incorrectly, they think they know something about sex, but they're sure that their kids know more than they do about the internet. And so they stay away from this. And they stay away also in fear and guilt, are caused by, oh my God, these kids are getting rewired. And I don't know how to do anything about it. So my approach to it is that you become a mentor, not a teacher, which implies a one-way transfer of information. But a mentor learns as much from the mentee as the mentee learns from the mentor. To approach these devices, these platforms, these applications as the incredibly powerful tools they are, and bring them to the child when the child needs the tool and you believe they can handle it with responsibility and with respect for themselves and others, and then sit down with them and learn it with them. I will guarantee you that they will teach you things you never knew you could do with that smartphone that's been sitting in your pocket for 5 years. I will guarantee that. And if we approach it with that sense of curiosity, a sense of adventure, it also says to the child, I love you, I respect you, I want to share this environment with you. I want to be with you in it. And what that does is it makes the third M, monitoring, that much easier because you are establishing a dialogue about it, an open dialogue about it, and even about the hard things in it. When parents say to me, when should I give my kid a smartphone? I said, when you are ready to talk explicitly about pornography and hate sites and all the things that are going to be one click away from them. If you can't talk to them about it, if you feel that you need to shield them from that, they should not have a smartphone until you're ready to do that. And obviously, there's a tipping point at which their need for the tool will overwhelm your concern about that. But you have to be able to be open about it. And then if you're able to talk about, say, pornography with your child and they come across it, they will, come to you and say, this is weird, or this is confusing, or this is upsetting, not, oh my God, I've got to hide this from mom and dad because I've been bad.
Yeah, the more we talk, the more I feel like, well, I'm here as a parent today, not as much as a psychologist, because this resonates so much, and I really appreciate the approaching this with curiosity. I think I know for myself and various parents in my life, we kind of have to get over this hump of I'm going to look dumb, I'm going to look old, right, and
Right.
outdated, and be willing to learn with our kids. And I think sometimes parents try to cultivate this, like, well, if we don't talk about it, they won't know how little I know.
Right.
And sort of create this facade that I know
Right.
more than I do. But really, if we want to be there for our kids and show up in these ways, it's evident we should be learning too and learning along with them if we need to.
We are going to look old, and we should be loud and proud about it. Yoda was old, right? Come on. There's some good things with old. Yeah, we can't run as fast as they can, and we can't be on top of the latest 6, 7, or whatever all the time, but we can learn it from them, right? And we're doing something really special there, which is we're saying, I love you, I respect you, I want to understand what engages you here. I want to understand this, and I want to share it with you, as opposed to go here, don't go there, do this, don't do that. And that really leads into one of the other kind of shifts of attitude and of language that I think is important, which is to move away from screen rules to screen expectations. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one is expectations are what we all have of each other. And so it gives the kids the agency to say, Mom, put your phone down, I want to talk. Or, to actually see if it can go both ways in terms of the expectations. The other piece of it is I was a kid once. I deal with adolescents all the time. And as an adolescent, I saw rules as things that were meant to be bent or broken. And as long as you could get away with it. Expectations are very different. With rules, mom and dad are pissed off at you and then it goes away and you go on to the next rule to break. Expectations are there, if you don't meet their expectations, that lingers. That is far more potent than a rule. Even though it comes off as much gentler, it lingers and it stays with you. And I think that the fact that we are able to let our kids have expectations of us is a really powerful thing in terms of bringing us closer.
I also like the idea of expectations modeling appropriate flexibility. That sometimes we can have a discussion about why tonight someone might be on their device later than we normally expect, or in this situation, and not so rigid. And that in of itself, I hope, is one more avenue to increase family real life engagement, which is obviously part of this discussion, what you're
Yeah.
doing when you're not on your device.
Right, right. Yeah, and I think that that's a really critical point, Erica, which is people say, "Oh, what are the limits to screen time? How much screen time should I let my kid have?" Um, and it's not as if everything on screens is toxic. Much of it can be very good, but the issue around time on screens is it's time not doing other things. It's displacing sleep. It's displacing a sit down family meal. It is displacing just time together, taking a walk, kicking a soccer ball around the backyard, just hanging out. And I think that we undervalue time shared with others. And because in many ways, because the screens are so frictionless and so easy and so personalized that what is on that screen will always seem more my thing than talking to mom.
Yeah. And this really speaks to conversations I've had with parents in the office is, that question of how much screen time, how much is too much. Two kids who are both spending an average of 2 hours on their screens a day. I'm concerned about the child who, when they're not on the screen, is pouting, they're bored, they're whining, they're trying, everything is trying to get back to screen time. Then the kid who puts the screen down and goes out and kicks a ball around or takes a walk or does some art or reads. That I really love that you're bringing up how important the non-screen time is and what's happening during that time.
Yeah, and I think it's helpful to encourage the kids to value non-screen time. So it's not about turn your screen off, it's bad. It's about have you tried parkour, or have you tried, whatever, have you tried doing this? And one of the things that really clicks with adolescents is I tell them you can't learn to make out with a smartphone, right? Go to what they value, go to what they're interested in.
You brought up, you used the word pornography earlier, and when I stop and think about that, it opens up a whole world. I mean, all of us were brought up differently, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I was probably relatively sheltered, as opposed to many others, from not just pornography but nudity and the whole ball of wax. I mean, I remember having a boss early in my career. She was German. I don't know how the topic came up, but they were very comfortable with nudity. She saw her parents nude, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like horrified by this entire discussion. But when I think about pornography and I think about AI, one of the things that you can do, obviously, is you can take somebody's picture and then put somebody else's body on it, which is just horrifying as a child. I mean, is that me? Are you making fun of me? Obviously, it's not me, but you're making fun of me. You do have to be able to talk about that. But how do you get parents comfortable with the fact that they have to utter the word pornography and they have to describe what possibly could happen and how that's not acceptable?
I think one of the perks of being a pediatrician is that everybody thinks that I'm wise and everybody thinks that I care about the kids above all things. Okay, I'll cop to that. And so just the fact that I talk about it openly it allows it. In other words, I talk about it in a sort of workmanlike manner, like this is part of the terrain out there. This is part of what's out there. We have to acknowledge it, and we acknowledge that sex is one of the primitive primal drivers of human behavior, right? And sex and hunger and staying alive, basically, those are what we are driven by at our basis level. And so to pretend it's not there is actually much more insidious and much more difficult than being able to talk about it and to understand that kids, very young, if they have a smartphone very young, they're going to stumble on a porn site, and it will confuse them, it will upset them, but it'll also make them feel like they've been bad unless we acknowledge that it's out there. And I would rather know that my 9-year-old has seen a porn site and talk about it because, I think that's part of healthy sexual development is becoming a sexual person at the time in your life when you're biologically ready for it and driven toward it. And I think that it gets twisted and perverse when we make it something that's bad or evil. And I think that the kids that I see in our clinical program, interestingly, the ones for whom pornography is the primary problem are not the ones brought in by their parents. They are the college students who never, had access to, other people or were in a community where it wasn't you weren't able to date or whatever, and they spend their entire adolescence with pornography, meeting their sexual needs. They get to college where everybody's hooking up and everybody's figuring this all out, and they have no clue how to talk to someone who they're sexually or romantically interested in. They have no clue about how to transform or take that sex drive and allow it to overcome their fear of intimacy, their fear of being awkward, their fear of, blowing it. And so in some ways, their sexual development has been slowed or stopped until, we can, say, look, porn is out there, but it's a fiction. And that's the other piece of it is your body doesn't look like that. Their body doesn't look like that. It doesn't behave like that. And not everybody wants sex all the time. But the worst of it to me is it turns the sex act into a transaction instead of an expression of openness and intimacy and trust and closeness, which is really the goodies of sexual behavior.
Right. Erica, we were discussing the book just the other day, and you brought up a couple of elements of the book, I believe guides or sections of the book that you thought were exceptionally beneficial for parents. Do you want to talk about your perception of the book itself?
As I said, the book is so approachable in so many ways, but one of the things that made it particularly approachable, I thought, was in the book, you have these media RX sections sprinkled throughout, And each time I came across one, they're not particularly long, but they're very informative and they're very actionable. And so I really appreciated that, because some of the things were, these subjects we're talking about here today, like, okay, well, what do I do with these? And in the book, you spell these out again in a very approachable and actionable sort of way. Uh, as the topic we were just talking about, I mean, right in there, I heard like a very actionable thing. You mentioned earlier, when we talk to kids about these things, or college students, young people, we need to do it in a way that is meaningful to them. I was thinking back to public health research of a couple decades ago about how do we encourage kids not to smoke. Well, saying you might get lung cancer in 30 years doesn't do it. If the kid values athletics, this is going to get in the way of performance. Those are the things that work. So I really like what you just offered in a very actionable way here too. Why should I not? What's wrong with pornography? Well, here are some of the downsides to viewing a lot of pornography. Losing the drive and to have these relationships in real life. So I saw that reflected in the book, and really appreciated that. Like I said, as a parent and a professional.
Yeah, and I tried to make it not just actionable, but in foundational ways. Because one of the other things, in writing the book, I was constantly aware of the fact that I was, in some ways, setting in stone something that was a moving target. Right. And so what I wanted to do is give people ways to think about the fundamentals of our relationships with screens so that it could be transformed into the future, with AI, et cetera. And actually, that's why I laid out the book as what, so what, now what? In terms of, what is going on in terms of the, developing brain and body. What are the ways that screens interface with this in positive as well as negative ways? And then looking forward, how can we bring these consciousnesses, I guess, these awarenesses to situations that are yet to develop in the future? And how can we understand not to be fearful, but to lean into it and let our 3-year-old teach us how to manage it?
And I think this is another real point of avoidance or fear for parents. And even if I have the conversation, I can't predict the next thing that's coming, and keeping up with that. And that's why I think this foundational approach is so important. We were just talking about the subject of pornography, but aside from that particular context, what was so important to me about what you just shared is, in addition to being able to talk about, let's say, pornography in this case, we're sending the message we can talk about hard things, we can talk about uncomfortable things. So when those new things show up on the digital scene that we didn't even anticipate, we're laying that groundwork with our kids that we can talk about it.
Right. And that mentorship relationship allows us to learn it together, right? And to move forward with it. And, the title of the last chapter is Yes, You Can. Because I think that's the one stopper that a lot of parents have. They feel like, oh my God, I can never catch up. I'll never be able to handle it. And yes, you will. The parenting philosophies and skills, frankly, are very similar. It's just the environment that has evolved, and we just need to live in the world we're given and make it better if we can. Right.
So let me ask you just a couple of quick questions, Michael. Just give me the first thing that pops into your head. The
speed dating.
Exactly. The of the last two M's, the memory one, you called the last two goodies.
Yeah.
Are memories, if we're living in a screen world and an online world, are there online memories? Is that really what we're creating here? Or are we creating memories of events or interactions we've had with the world or with individuals? What are those memories?
I feel that a lot of what we do on screen is quite ephemeral. It is in the moment, but you don't retain it in the same way. That's why I was so excited to hear that you're possibly coming to Boston and we can meet IRL. We can be across a table from each other. We can share a cup of coffee. I think it is our human interactions that stick with us, good and bad. But we don't, I mean, because we can click off of this TikTok and onto that YouTube and to, an email and to a text and back again. First of all, I think it's very transactional, but it's also very in the moment. And you know, it, I don't read contracts the same way online as I do on a piece of paper. And I still value a physical book, because I think that I read it differently and I'm handling it, I'm smelling it, I'm feeling it. So I think that we have to um, understand that the ease with which we interact with the screen environment actually makes it so those memories slip away from us, whereas the friction of a real book and a real person and a real experience um, makes it makes it into our memories. I also think that the speed with which stuff passes by us in the screen world is so great that we often have to take a moment to lower our hyperstimulation and literally take a walk in the woods or do forest bathing. If you know what forest bathing is, it's amazing and it sounds incredibly boring. To walk into the woods, close your eyes, listen to what you're hearing, smell what you're smelling, feel what you're feeling, and, kind of lower that level of, twitch nerves, that we have in this space and realize what an incredible being we are and a whole being we are, as opposed to just, an information, sort of nerve central, in and out information, but it doesn't stick in the same way.
Okay, interesting. There's a lot of media attention on on the online world and how the negative impact it's creating in the world. But my question is, are excessive online activities, are they necessarily bad? One, and two, are they reordering how teens interact? Is that actually happening, or is there something else afoot here?
Well, first of all, we have to define excessive, right? When does the right amount or just enough become too much? And I define that on what we're not doing because of that, right? And I think that if we are able to be and essentially checking on ourselves time and time, is this the best use of my time? Is this the best use of my attention and my thoughts? And this is a matter of self-respect. And self-respect is something that's a real struggle for many of us, right? That we're constantly feeling less than, we're constantly feeling more than. And this is something that does occur in social media. If we go to social media and we seek connection with people, and everybody out there is using social media the way that the corporations do to market themselves to the world and show you the great vacation they went on or their dad's new sports car, or their hot new boyfriend, and you go to it seeking connection and you say, wow, everybody else is happier than I am. They're thinner than I am. They're prettier than I am. They're whatever. And so you're left feeling less than, even though you went to it trying to build on the self you knew and the limitations you knew you had. And I would say that we should really rethink the way we use social media. I think that if we can learn to use social media authentically, what I mean by that is being our true selves, acknowledging our limitations, acknowledging our fears, acknowledging what means something to us, what makes us laugh, what makes us cry. I think that done right, you could have a kid in Ukraine and a kid in Russia who are on social media with each other and truly know each other, whose leaders say, that's the enemy, go kill. And they'll say, no, that's not the enemy. I know them better than I know you. And I think that social media used authentically could be an instrument of peace.
Interesting. Erica, we'll flip it to you real quick. Think about the book, think about our discussion. What's the one thing that you want, that you've taken away or that you want to make sure that parents know about?
Two things come to mind that we've been talking about. It is that you can do this. And I needed that too, as I said, as a parent. I think the book really highlights for parents, this may feel scary, this may, feel unapproachable, but you can do this. And like so many endeavors in life, right? This doesn't require perfection. Approaching this doesn't require perfection.
Mm-hmm.
And we can learn along with our kids. And as we've talked about today, it's what you're doing with your digital time. It's also what you're doing when you're not having digital time. We've been talking a lot about this emotional boredom, which I love. I love the opportunity that boredom provides us. I was also thinking of another emotion that's so important that does not, I don't think for most people happen on screens, which is awe. You got to go out into the world to experience a sense of awe, and and that's such an important human emotion too. And it happens in real life so much more than it does on a screen. And
I love
that's
that.
something I
I
want
love
for
that.
everyone to
It
do.
made me flash on the first time I went and saw the Grand Canyon.
Mhm.
And I'd spent my whole life looking at pictures of the Grand Canyon. I've probably seen millions of pictures. And then when you see it, it's like getting a thump to the chest. It's like, OMG. And, and not only is it the big things, it's sometimes the small things. It's sometimes the little things when you see a child have, see an anthill for the first time, and there the awe is there, and I love that, and I wish I'd spoken to it in the book. So maybe for the second edition, I'll bring you in as my co-author.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. One of the ways I like to use the digital landscape in a positive way is to, there's great drone videos of different places, and I love to look at pictures. I love science and space sites and the amazing pictures that I actually can only, get some of those online. But it
Yeah,
also doesn't compare to standing under, a night sky in a dark space and looking up and seeing Milky Way.
yeah, exactly, exactly. That's I mean, we have a tool at our hands where we could be on top of Mount Everest without risking our lives, and we could, be on the surface of Mars through a rover there. We have an amazing capability to learn and to sense other things, but it is limited, and we have to recognize that it is limited to what it can do and not assume it can do more. And the most important thing is we don't want to limit ourselves, that we are much more capable than what we allow ourselves. And actually, one of the most meaningful reviews of my book was when a 17-year-old high school junior from Redondo Beach, California, called me up and said, I know you think this book is for parents, but this book is for us, which is very interesting.
Nice.
And what she said was, you tell the stories of the kids who are, you know, working their way through this, and that's what resonated with her, is the realization that there are kids that I've worked with who, some of whom have been in really dire straits, but that they can get through it. They can take a deep breath and look within and respect and take care of themselves.
Yeah, what a meaningful endorsement.
Mm, yeah.
I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So what I'd like to do is give each of you a minute to kind of summarize or to talk about what's currently important or things you want us to know about. Michael, I'm going to give you the last word. So Erica, I'll let you go first.
Okay. We'd actually started off our talk today. You were talking about some diagnostic categories and the relationship. to digital use, and especially with anxiety. I was thinking about it, we said today that some of what we're talking about here has always existed outside the digital landscape, and now we're applying it to the digital landscape. So, unfortunately, anxiety is a condition that tends to drive us to do things that we think will help us to feel better, but it's momentary, and then it reinforces the anxiety, right? And that certainly happens for us here, as you use the word amplified. Um, and so I think about the approaches we've historically used in the behavioral health field with anxiety, to help people kind of break the cycle of doing the things that's actually driving the anxiety, not making it better. And so in my own work, I've really encouraged people to tune into like so many behaviors that we might do to excess, right? We can become aware of like that moment where something that felt good, felt productive, we start to feel some tension around it. It starts to not feel as good for us. And so really want to, kind of encourage awareness of that moment. And also encourage awareness, as we talked about today. When you put the screen down, how do you feel? How is that time affecting you? I really think that that's something, that it's important to be mindful of, to observe, and kind of work in that time, to improve your relationship with the digital landscape.
Excellent. Michael?
I would build on that and say what we need to do is improve our relationship, not just to the digital landscape, but to ourselves. It's about really valuing ourselves. One of the concepts that floats around entertainment all the time and the internet, of course, is, oh, I'm killing time. Time is all we've got. Time is what we've got. Do we want to kill it, or do we want to value it? Do we want to make it a rich and meaningful experience, even if that requires doing something that's hard? I think that part of this is examining our default behaviors, our reflexive responses to things like, do I get into an elevator and pull my phone out to catch up on the news or whatever? Or do I look around myself and see what's out there? And I will, I guess, leave with another story I'm telling. As you might imagine, when I spend a day in the hospital taking care of kids who really are struggling with many of these issues of anxiety and depression, sadness, conflict with family, etc. I often feel like I'm giving soul transfusions to these kids, just sort of helping them find themselves within, to find the hope, to find the reason for moving forward. Because some of these kids are even suicidal. And so I came out of the hospital at the end of one of these long days, just feeling laden, just feeling heaviness, and like I was drained by all of this angst that I'd been wrestling with. And I stepped out of the hospital. I turned toward the parking garage where my car is, and there was a brilliant sunset. It was pink and gold and purple, and all of that anxiety, all of that heaviness fell away from me. And it was like this, you know, hug from Mother Nature, essentially, and it made me feel, oh, yeah, I'm on this earth. My feet are on the ground. Things are okay. And then I looked around me on the street, and everyone was staring at their phones, and they missed it. And so I think that giving ourselves the love, giving ourselves the respect, and really appreciating our passage through not just this physical world, but through the time we're on it, and we're on it with each other. To really value those things, because ultimately those are not just the memory makers, but those are the things that make us human.
Excellent. Well said. Thank you very much. Let me close by saying that our sponsor today is Equilibria Psychological and Consultation Services. It's an insurance-based provider whose mission is to provide individuals to help individuals achieve their personal potential and long-term growth by compassionately and respectfully helping clients live in balance. Visit equilibriapcs.com, equilibriapcs.com. You can look for them on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Also look for me on Instagram, Daniel J. Gomez 24, and on LinkedIn. Now for the disclaimer. I am not a medical professional and I am not providing medical advice. The opinion of our speakers is solely their own. This podcast is copyrighted and cannot be reproduced without the express written consent of EPCS Management, LLC.